On a quiet Wednesday evening in October 2005, the small town of Vincent, Alabama was shaken by a tragedy that would unravel a web of lies and deceit. Janet Tillman, a beloved wife and mother, was found dead in the parsonage of the Vincent Revival Center. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident soon revealed itself as a carefully orchestrated murder, exposing the double life of her husband, Timothy Dane Tillman, the church's pastor. This case, which garnered national attention and was featured on Investigation Discovery's Handsome Devil series, is a chilling tale of betrayal, infidelity, and the lengths to which a man would go to pursue a new life. The story of Janet Tillman's murder is not just a crime narrative. It's a cautionary tale about the masks people wear and the devastating consequences of living a lie. Janet Ritter Tillman was born and raised in Alabama, growing up in a close-knit family that valued faith and community. She was known for her kind heart and gentle spirit, traits that endeared her to those around her. Janet's upbringing in the South instilled in her a strong sense of family values and a deep-rooted faith that would guide her throughout her life. In her early adulthood, Janet met Timothy Dane Tillman, a charismatic young man with aspirations of becoming a pastor. The two felt an instant connection, bonding over their shared faith and vision for the future. Their courtship was swift, and in December 1983, Janet and Timothy were married, embarking on what they believed would be a lifetime of love and service to their community. As newlyweds, Janet and Timothy settled into life together, with Janet supporting her husband's ambitions in the ministry. She took on the role of a pastor's wife with grace and dedication, becoming an integral part of their church community. Janet's warmth and approachability made her a favorite among the congregation, and she quickly became known as a pillar of support for many. The couple's family grew with the birth of their two daughters, Jessica Danielle and Tiffany Nicole. Janet embraced motherhood wholeheartedly, balancing her responsibilities at home with her duties at the church. To those looking in from the outside, the Tillmans appeared to be the perfect family, a devoted pastor, his loving wife, and their two beautiful daughters. Timothy Dane Tillman's rise to become the pastor of Vincent Revival Center was marked by his apparent devotion to his faith and his ability to connect with his congregation. His sermons were passionate, his prayers fervent, and his commitment to the church seemed unwavering. The community of Vincent embraced him as a spiritual leader, trusting him to guide them in matters of faith and morality. However, beneath the surface of Tillman's pastoral persona, there were cracks beginning to form. Despite his role as a religious leader, Tillman had not completed the formal credentialing process required by his denomination. He repeatedly avoided or delayed submitting the necessary applications, raising questions about his commitment to the official standards of his position. As the years passed, the seemingly perfect facade of the Tillman marriage began to crumble. While Janet remained dedicated to her family and her role in the church, Timothy's behavior started to change. He became distant, often citing church business or retreats as reasons for his absences from home. Unbeknownst to Janet and her congregation, Timothy had begun living a double life. In May 2005, he started writing letters to a woman in Mississippi, referring to her as his soulmate and expressing that he couldn't live without her. He even went so far as to propose marriage to this woman in August of the same year, all while still married to Janet. Timothy Dane Tillman's double life extended well beyond his pastoral duties, revealing a pattern of infidelity and inappropriate behavior that ultimately culminated in the tragic murder of his wife. Janet, while presenting himself as a devoted man of God to his congregation at Vincent Revival Center in Alabama, Tillman had a history of extramarital affairs and visits to strip clubs that dated back to his time in Florida and Minnesota. In 1995, Tillman was spotted leaving a Florida strip club, which led to his dismissal from his ministry position there. Undeterred, he relocated his family to Minnesota, where he once again found himself embroiled in scandal. Tillman was removed from his church position after engaging in a sleazy affair with a member of his congregation. His behavior continued to escalate, and while working as a jailer in Minnesota, he was charged and sentenced to 6 months in jail for a sexual encounter with a prostitute whom he had offered to drive home. Despite these transgressions, Tillman's most significant affair began while he was pastor in Vincent, Alabama. He initiated a relationship with a woman from Washington State, creating an elaborate false identity as Timothy Patrick McNally, a divorced U.S. Navy officer. This deception went so far as to include the purchase of military clothing to support his claim of being a Navy SEAL. Tillman maintained this double life for years, even proposing marriage to his mistress just 2 months before murdering his wife Janet. This web of lies and infidelity ultimately formed a crucial part of the prosecution's case, demonstrating Tillman's motive for wanting to end his marriage through violent means rather than divorce, which would have jeopardized his position as a pastor. On the evening of October 26, 2005, the quiet of the Vincent Revival Center parsonage was shattered by the sound of a gunshot. Janet Tillman, 40 years old, was fatally shot in the back with a shotgun. Timothy Tillman claimed it was a tragic accident that occurred while they were moving guns from his car to their bedroom for safekeeping. According to Tillman's initial story, one of the guns began to slip from his arms. As Janet reached out to help, the gun allegedly discharged, striking her in the back and killing her instantly. The timing was peculiar. About 45 minutes before the Wednesday night church service was set to begin, with church members already gathering nearby. In the moments following the shooting, Timothy Tillman called 911, his voice reportedly frantic as he explained the situation to the dispatcher. He claimed that there had been a terrible accident and that his wife had been shot. The recording of this call would later become a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation. First responders arrived at the scene to find Janet Tillman dead from a shotgun wound to her back. Timothy Tillman, appearing distraught, recounted his version of events to the police. At first glance, it seemed to be a horrific accident, a tragic end to what many believed was a loving marriage. Initially, local law enforcement had little reason to doubt Tillman's account of the events. However, Janet's family members were skeptical from the beginning. They couldn't reconcile the careful, loving Janet they knew with the victim of such a careless accident. Their doubts eventually led them to contact state investigators, bringing in the Alabama Bureau of Investigation (OBI) to take a closer look at the case. OBI LT Scott Barville and CPL Thomas Witten took charge of the investigation. As they delved deeper into the circumstances surrounding Janet's death, inconsistencies in Tillman's story began to emerge. When I saw the work the Vincent Police Department had done and read his interview, I knew he was lying, Barville later told all.com. The investigators began to uncover a complex web of deception that Tillman had woven over the years. They discovered evidence of a double life that included an affair, false identities, and financial irregularities. What had initially appeared to be a tragic accident was slowly revealing itself to be a carefully planned murder. As the investigation progressed, a clear motive for Janet's murder began to emerge. Timothy Tillman had been leading a double life for years, engaging in an affair with a woman named Molly Bazzari from Washington State. Just 2 months before Janet's death, Tillman had proposed to Bazzari in a grand gesture at a restaurant in Mississippi. Tillman's desire to be with Bazzari and start a new life appeared to be the driving force behind his actions. The investigators theorized that Tillman saw murder as his way out of his marriage, allowing him to pursue his relationship with Bazzari without the complications of a divorce or the potential damage to his reputation as a pastor. Molly Bazzari, the woman at the center of Tillman's double life, had been in a relationship with him for several years, unaware that he was married. Tillman had crafted an elaborate false identity to maintain this relationship, presenting himself to Bazzari and her family as Timothy Patrick McNally, a divorced U.S. Navy officer. Tillman's deception was so thorough that he even purchased military clothing to support his false claim of being a Navy SEAL. While Janet believed her husband was away on church retreats, he was actually visiting Bazzari in Washington. The relationship had progressed to the point where Tillman was making plans for a future with Bazzari, including the idea of her being a mother figure to his daughters. The breakthrough in the case came when investigators discovered a $5,000 loan taken out in Janet Tillman's name after her death. This financial irregularity gave them the leverage they needed to bring Tillman in for questioning. In 2007, Tillman was arrested in Florida on a forgery charge related to this loan. Following his arrest on the forgery charge, Tillman was indicted and charged with Janet's murder. The case against him was building, with evidence of his double life, the affair with Bazzari, and the financial improprieties all pointing towards his guilt in Janet's death. The prosecution built a strong case against Tillman, despite the lack of direct physical evidence linking him to the murder. Key pieces of evidence included: Point 1. Cell phone records that revealed Tillman's affair with Molly Bazzari and his frequent trips to Washington. 2. Financial documents showing the loan taken out in Janet's name after her death, which Tillman had allegedly forged. 3. Testimonies from church members and family that highlighted inconsistencies in Tillman's behavior before and after Janet's death. For evidence of Tillman's elaborate deception, including his false identity as a Navy SEAL and his proposal to Bazzari just months before Janet's death. The prosecution argued that these pieces of evidence, when taken together, painted a clear picture of Tillman's motive and opportunity to commit the murder. They contended that Tillman had carefully planned Janet's death to free himself for a new life with Bazzari. Timothy Dane Tillman's road through the justice system was long and complex. In October 2009, he was found guilty of Janet's murder in his first trial. Shelby County Circuit Judge Don Reeves sentenced Tillman to life in prison, the maximum sentence possible. During the sentencing, Tillman pleaded for mercy, but Janet's father asked that he never be allowed to walk free again. However, in 2011, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals overturned the conviction in a 3-2 decision. The court ruled that Judge Reeves had erred in allowing Tillman to be tried simultaneously for murder and possession of a forged instrument. This decision led to a retrial. On June 22, 2012, Tillman was convicted for the second time of Janet's murder. He was again sentenced to life in prison, a sentence he continues to serve at Limestone Correctional Facility. The conviction and sentence brought a measure of closure to Janet's family and the community of Vincent, though the pain of their loss remains. Throughout the trials and appeals process, Tillman maintained his innocence, insisting that Janet's death was a tragic accident. He portrayed himself as a loving husband and father, devastated by the loss of his wife. In court, he spoke of his love for Janet and their daughters attempting to paint a picture of a family man wrongly accused. However, these testimonials stood in stark contrast to the evidence presented by the prosecution. The image of a devoted pastor and family man crumbled in the face of revelations about his affair, his false identity, and the financial irregularities surrounding Janet's death. Tillman's words rang hollow to many who had followed the case, including members of his former congregation who had once trusted him as their spiritual leader. The murder of Janet Tillman is a tragic tale that shook the small community of Vincent, Alabama, and captured national attention. It serves as a stark reminder of the devastation that can be wrought by deception and betrayal. Janet's life was cut short by the very person who had vowed to love and protect her, leaving behind her daughters and a community struggling to understand such a senseless act. This case also highlights the importance of thorough investigation and the persistence of law enforcement in uncovering the truth. Despite initial appearances of an accident, the diligent work of investigators brought to light the dark reality behind Janet's death. While justice has been served in the legal sense, the impact of this tragedy continues to resonate with all those who knew and loved Janet Tillman.